inshaAllah. He is somebody that I consider dear to my heart, a hafiz, a serious student of the deen, and someone who goes wherever the knowledge of Allah and His Prophet ﷺ are, that's where he is at. He's a man who likes to really bring benefit to the community. Since he was a youth and now that he's getting the gray hairs, he's still inshallah trying to bring education and inspire a love of Islam and a love of an Islamic identity amongst those who are elderly and young and those who are just as confused as all of us. So we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to benefit from him, his insights, and some of his own experiences, and how then we can inshallah allow this to be a place to begin a new conversation, inshallah ta'ala. Without further ado, Imam Nihal Khan, inshallah.
Is the stream good to go? Yeah? Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So, as Imam Umar mentioned, my name is Nihal Khan. And basically this presentation is going to be me rambling about my recent travels throughout the Muslim world. So, for the last 10 years, I've only lived in the United States for 4 years. So I spent 3 years in India, and I spent 3 years in Istanbul, in Turkey. While I was in India, as you can see, so this is actually my Google Maps. Like if you know how you tag places. So a lot of these places I've been to, some of them I wanted to go, I didn't have a chance to go to. But I like maps. I think maps are very good educational tools. Now, I'm starting my PhD in history/Islamic studies, and as somebody that was a terrible student growing up, I could never for my life be told to memorize dates. I wanted to learn in a way in which history would come alive. And I gave this presentation last week in Atlanta, and the Jum'ah khutbah that I basically had given had spoken about the importance of understanding history. And I'll tell you the problem that we have with understanding history in 2024. When I say the word history, what do people tend to think? They think of dates. They think of events that are disjointed and not connected to their reality, right? You think something happened in the past and it has nothing to do with your existence today. But that is a false premise and a false belief that today we're gonna kick out the door. And we're actually going to see how where we are today, the language that we speak, the cultures that we are a part of, are directly connected to how the past unfolded and connected to us in the present. So if you look at this map, I had a chance, and to give you an idea, in the last 10 years, I've traveled to 21 countries. 21 countries I had a chance to go to. Some of them are very common destinations for us to go to, especially if you're an American passport holder. Some of them are relatively inaccessible if you're an American passport holder. So, for example, I am interested in Islamic history, hence my presentation is titled Around the Muslim World. But my definition of the Muslim world will not just go from this area, which is, what they call the historic East or the Near East. The fact that me and you are living here today, the fact that me and you are in the United States, we have masajid, and we also have an indigenous history of this land, it also extends to non-Eastern countries. Hence, I left America out of it because I'm born and raised here, but I also spent a lot of time going to cities in Europe, particularly, I traveled to England twice, I traveled to Spain, I traveled to France, Italy, the Netherlands, Germany, Poland. And anytime somebody thinks about traveling to those countries in Europe, they think about eating probably like croissants, pizza, and thinking that, oh, I think this is another issue. A lot of times Muslims who will like travel to European countries may think to themselves that Europe or European culture is a superior culture. Speaking a language like French or English or some other language in Europe is a superior language. My purpose was to kind of break that. I was very interested in colonial history. Colonial history is extremely, extremely important because of the fact that colonialism, particularly European colonialism, with a specific reference to the Spanish, the British, and the French, are very, very, very defining of why me and you are sitting here in the United States speaking English with each other, and we're not in a country of origin that perhaps our ancestors came from. Let me ask you, how many of you are from Africa, west, east, or north? Right? How many of you that are from the African continent are from a country that was colonized by the French? Okay, how many of you are from a country that was colonized by the British? Okay, how many of you are from a country colonized by the Spanish? There you go. How many people are here from India, Pakistan, or Bangladesh? Right? Who colonized us? Not just the British, actually. The British, the Dutch, the French, the Portuguese, all those countries had a time of colonization. Hence, all of you, how many of you are from Malaysia or Indonesia? Okay, who colonized the Indonesians? The Dutch. Okay, how many of you are from the Philippines? There you go, who colonized the Philippines? Say that again? The Spanish and then the Americans, right? How many of you are indigenously been in America for like 100+ years? Right? Who colonized what is the modern United States? The British, the Spanish, and the French, majorly. Right? So colonization is completely informative of our experience as Muslims. So the first empire that I'm just going to show you a map of, and I think, again, maps are really, really, really helpful. This is where the Spanish colonized. When I was a kid, I used to think to myself, I was like, why is it that I live here in the United States and speak English, and the British also speak English in like that funny accent? I was like, they must have taken my language. And I used to think to myself, somebody from America probably went and lived in England, and then lo and behold, I learned about British colonization. And I used to think to myself too, that why is it that people that live in Mexico or live in South America speak Spanish? And I was like, oh look, there's so many people that speak Spanish here that they probably went here and basically taught them Spanish. What state are we in? Arizona. Was Arizona always an English-speaking state? No, as you can see from this map, let me see if I can make it bigger. Initially, Arizona was a colony of the Spanish. Florida was a colony of the Spanish. Can somebody tell me, let's see how Arizona public education is. Why do we speak English in Arizona? And why is Arizona how did Arizona become a part of the United States? So raise your hand. Can somebody explain it? Yes. Louisiana Purchase. Be more specific. They bought Louisiana from Spain. Is that correct? The French. Okay. All right. That's part of it, but what else is a part of it? Yes. Manifest Destiny, what else is a part of it? There you go. That's what I was looking for. That's the correct answer. The Mexican War, right? all of this was Spanish territory. So if you actually study history, Florida, and this is not a US history course, but I'm just giving you an idea, right? Florida was one of the first Spanish colonies. It was West and East Florida, and eventually that was bought by the British. But here, this whole area, ain't nobody purchasing nothing. Actually, the Louisiana Purchase didn't extend to here. The Louisiana Purchase was more east. But here, this had to do with the Mexican War, which Mexico lost with the United States, and they annexed everything basically from California, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, everything you see in red, okay? All the way down to South America. So that's the first empire that is important to understand. The second empire is the French. Look at how big the French Empire was. You have mainly what? North Africa, everything going from Algeria down to Senegambia and whatnot, and down there as well. And then you have even, you know, Madagascar, all these little islands, Reunion, and all these small ones, and then all these little colonies here and there. And you all know the story about this. You see how much of the French were in America? In North America? But I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on here. This right here, North Africa, particularly Algeria, was the crown jewel of the French. So much so that when Algerians got up and fought against who? The French. They won, alhamdulillah, right? Inshallah, as you can see, when the French fought back, they won. In Vietnam, they won. And inshallah, Palestine will also win. South Africa won. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give ease to the oppressed and remove the oppressors from this world. Say Ameen. But here, the loss of Algeria was so bad that the French Republic, the government, was dissolved, right? That's how bad it was. But generally speaking, look, these are all, or at least not there, but these are all areas where Muslims were. This area, Syria as well, right after World War I, Syria came under French rule. Once upon a time, Turkey, for a very small time period, certain sections of it was ruled by France. And also in India, there were sections that were also under French rule, but eventually the French lost their influence and they left. So, and I have a point here, and I'll come back to this. And the third empire is the British Empire. The British Empire, you never heard the saying that the sun never sets on the British Empire? Because look, they had all of this in North America and a little bit of South America. Anybody here from Trinidad, Tobago, or Guyana? No? Okay. So I grew up in the Northeast, and we have a lot of folks from Trinidad, Tobago, and whatnot. The British had, basically from Iraq, and then eventually Palestine, and all the way down to South America, South Africa. Then they had India as well, we know about that. And then they had Australia. You ever heard that saying, the sun does not set on the British Empire? So there's a famous Indian historian, Shashi Tharoor. He said that the sun does not set on the British Empire because God does not trust them in the dark. Right? He said a very funny point. But again, this is how the world has been affected by colonization. And in colonization, what eventually happens? Because can't someone say also that some of these Muslim empires, they also went and they were in other nations as well? Colonization is defined by an outside entity who uses its power to take the resources of a country, influence their culture, deem their culture superior, and deem the indigenous land's culture inferior. That's what colonization did. And it did that to the entirety of the Muslim world, and we are still reeling from it. They say that just from India, that roughly over a period of 300 years, the British siphoned out $45 trillion in today's dollars. So imagine what that does to a place. Because I'll tell you right now, immigration is part and parcel of the world. But at the same time, if you are from a place and you have a culture and you have a family there, it is not natural to want to leave that place. It is not natural to want to leave that place. Many of us who come from backgrounds in which our families left another country, It's because of what? Economic reasons, political reasons, reasons of safety. And I would argue that the economic stability, that the political safety, that the social fabric of these nations was not helped by colonization, but was destroyed by colonization. And this will move on to the next point. So who are we talking about? What were the three empires? Spanish, French, British. This here is Cecil Rhodes. Anybody know who Cecil Rhodes is? Ever heard this name Rhodes? Anybody here, by the raise of your hands, ever heard of the Rhodes Scholarship? Right? The Rhodes Scholarship is one of the most prestigious scholarships offered to students all throughout the world to spend a year in England studying for a master's, for a master in philosophy. This right here, you know, like, who would have thought that it would have been a good idea to put a white British man standing from one end of Africa to the other to showcase, hey, we're going to build this continent. But lo and behold, Cecil Rhodes wanted to build what they called the Cairo to Cape Railroad. They wanted to make a railroad from Cairo all the way down to Cape Town, South Africa. Now, if you go back here, right, you see that the British had everything from Egypt down to South Africa. So this was an image that the British put out saying that this is how we're going to civilize the Africans. Right? And we also know this, that the British were not nice to many of the people, the subjects of their empire. Anyone heard of Winston Churchill? Raise your hand. Who was Winston Churchill? Prime Minister of? When? Around what time? What was the major war that was fought in his time? World War II or I? Who says I? Who says II? Right, so he basically, he was there for a while, let's just say that. I'll let you look up the rest. But Winston Churchill, the West sees him as like the savior and whatnot. But at the same time, as guys like him, Winston Churchill starved 3 million Bengalis in Bengal today. Right? Bengal, between West Bengal, India and Bangladesh. And he said that they're savages, let them die. And literally they siphoned those resources out to England. And they were okay with that. That's just what it was. Right? So that's the type of, these are the types of people that we were basically dealing with all those years ago. Now, before I talk about these empires, I want to talk about an incident that happened, the opening of Constantinople. Constantinople is known as what city today? What is it? Istanbul. What was the name of Constantinople after the Muslims entered it? What did it become? No, Turkey is the country. What's the name of the city after the Muslims came into Constantinople? What name did it become? Istanbul? It actually was not Istanbul. It was actually Islambul. The actual name of Istanbul is Islambul. Istanbul is a 100-year-old name, like 100 or so. So, long story short, about 100 years ago, they wanted to secularize Turkey, and during that time period, the name Istanbul was too Muslimy. They didn't like that. But they knew it either as Constantinople, which was a name that was known, or Islambul. Istanbul, bul in Turkish, like for example, Adrianople, Constantinople, is the Greek word for a city, or like in the inhabitants of. And then Istan, like Pakistan, Uzbekistan, just a land city. So they kind of secularized the name. But, my point aside, this is a picture on the left, an artist's rendering of Muslims when they first entered New Jersey. No, joking. This is when an artist's rendering of Muslims when they first entered Constantinople. Now, what was famous about Constantinople? Like, what was the big deal about Constantinople? I'll tell you. So this is a picture on the right that I took of the grave of this guy, Fatih Sultan Mehmet, who was basically one of the most famous Ottoman emperors. And this hadith is in the books of hadith, in which the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لَتُفْتَحُنَّ الْقِسْطَنْطِنِيَّةِ, that Constantinople will indeed be opened. وَلَنِعْمَ الْأَمِيرُ أَمِيرُهَا, And what a beautiful leader this basically this group will have. وَلَنِعْمَ الْجَيْشُ ذَلِكَ الْجَيْشُ. And how beautiful of an army will that army basically be. And in that time period, the city of Constantinople, if you were to ever look at a map, so if I actually go back here, just for the sake of looking at a map, the Roman Empire was divided into two parts. On the left side was basically known as, right, the Western Empire, the actual Roman Empire, and then the eastern side was known as the Byzantine Empire, or the Orthodox, Roman Catholic Church. The main church used to be in the city of Constantinople. So a city near Rome was the capital of the Western Empire, and a city in modern-day Turkey, now known as Istanbul, was in the Eastern Empire. So it was like a really, really big deal when Muslims came into Istanbul and basically took it over. Now here's the thing, you know how people are like, Muslims are coming in to establish Sharia law and they're gonna kill us all, right? Some of your neighbors may believe that. But the truth of it is that when you look at stuff like this, next picture, no, not this one. This is the modern day Hagia Sophia. By a raise of hands, how many of you have been to Istanbul? Raise your hands, right? A lot of you have. So when you see a picture like this has become, sorry, I keep hitting this thing. This has basically become the main masjid of Istanbul. But if you look closely at it, many of the fixtures of the old church of the Byzantine era are still there. For example, in the mihrab, they still have this image that they made of Mother Mary. Now today, Muslims, as you know, we don't pray in front of pictures. So just because of out of respect it being an old church, they simply covered it up with a cloth. So the thesis, and I'll tell you this, the word thesis is very important because in history, people come up with all sorts of theses or theories. So one of the things that people love mentioning, so we're gonna go over this in a moment, me and my wife went to Iran. Iran was an amazing, amazing foray into history. But one thing they say over and over again is that the Arabs came and destroyed everything, right? The Muslims came and they destroyed everything. But here, this puts that thesis to fault, because if Muslims were there to just take over and destroy everything, why did they leave this like pristine church in the way it was and they simply pray in it without destroying any of the symbols? So much so that if you go into the Hagia Sophia today, there's a little white area that they used to crown the new emperor in, and it has a religious significance within Eastern Roman Christianity. They didn't destroy it, they didn't remove it. Muslims do not even pray in that area. So my point of mentioning Turkey is that in 1453, huge thing happened. The fall of the Eastern Christian Empire. Now let me ask you this. You know in the Quran, when the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is alive, Allah reveals a verse. Allah says, Alif Lam Mim Ghulibatir Rum. Alif Lam Mim, the Romans have become victorious. You know how today you have superpowers? You have like China, you have Russia, you have America. At that time, the superpowers were the Sasanians, the Persians, and the Byzantines. And the capital of the Byzantine, the head of the Byzantine Empire, during the time and the life of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the center of it was Hagia Sophia. Many people don't realize that. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says Ghulibatir Rum, He is talking about the remnants of those that used to administer this church. Now, again, that idea that Muslims come in and they destroy everything. When you actually read the history of how Muslims took Constantinople, there were certain pleas from even within the city, certain folks that kind of welcomed the Muslims into Istanbul, even though they did have to fight for it and go to war for it. Because you ever heard of these people known as the Crusaders? Right, part of the old Latin group of Christians that were going around. They were killing their own Christian brothers and sisters in other cities. When Salahuddin Ayyubi came into Jerusalem, when he came in, he asked, right, what do you expect to be done with you? Similar to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he came to Mecca. And they asked for forgiveness. And Salahuddin showed them forgiveness. But before that, It was known that the Crusaders would come into Jerusalem and cause massacres in the tens of thousands, not so much of Muslims, though yes, Muslims, but also of other sects of Christians. They say that the Hagia Sophia was in such a bad state, some reports even mention that the Sultan buying it. And many of the churches were converted to masjids, but many of the churches also were not converted. If you go today, there's a whole section in Istanbul known as Balat. It's all untouched churches, some of them from even before the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, why does this matter? Because in 1453, the Ottomans take Constantinople. But I want you to understand what the power and extent of the Ottoman Empire was. Many of the places we're from today, the Ottomans controlled it for a very long time, right? Aljazair, Tunis, Tripoli, Alexandria, Cairo, Jerusalem, Beirut, Damascus, Baghdad, Mecca, Medina. All of these parts of the Muslim world the Ottomans controlled. But you know where the Ottoman capital used to be for many years? Eastern Europe. Eastern Europe used to be called Rumelia. And it was one of the prized possessions of the Ottomans. Because back then, the Ottomans came out from here and they started coming this way, and they realized that the Roman Empire was really strong, so they took boats up this way, and they took all of this. They took all of Greece, they took all of Sofia, they took Belgrade, they took Budapest. We also went to Athens, by the way. Athens is my least favorite city in the world. And I'll tell you why. Muslims were in Greece for almost 400 years. Anybody here been to anyone here been to Greece? Greece? Anybody here been to Greece? All right, save your money, good. Right? But in Greece, they have what is known as the Acropolis. Many of you may have heard about it in Western civilization. They say it's like the peak of Western civilization. The Acropolis is a beautiful structure in which it was a temple, right, of the Greek gods. But when the Ottomans came in, they actually built a masjid there, and they used to give the adhan for 450 years from there. And basically, when the Greeks revolted, they went out of their way to destroy as many masjids as possible, remove any trace of Islam in Greece, to the extent that today, if you go there, masajid have been closed and they've been desecrated. And at the same time, it's illegal for any Muslim there to build a masjid with a minaret and a dome. And the one masjid that we did go there, the masajid are either in basements or they have to be in very industrial areas. Anyways, I can talk about that all day long. But the point being is that this was the Ottomans. Now, what were the three empires I mentioned? What was the first one? Spanish. The Spanish Empire was a force to be reckoned with, and I'm going to tell you why. 1453, Fatih Sultan Mehmed gets to Constantinople. Constantinople is this epic Christian place that Christians were looking to all throughout the world. It falls, the Muslims take it, and now at those times, those Christian empires, the Catholic empires, particularly those in Spain, particularly those in Italy, were like, this is dangerous, man. This guy's taken it, and look, where did the Ottomans get to? They were already here. Right under Spain. Right under Spain. Spain was a Muslim country, a Muslim area for 800 almost years. These names of different mufassirin, Al-Qurtubi, for example, was from the city of Cordoba. So, 1453, the Ottomans are a force to be reckoned with. And 1492 arrives. And all the Muslims in Spain, you know what they started doing? This is actually a really crazy thing to think about. How did Muslims that were in one area for almost 800 years, 700 years, lose that dominion? It's very simple. In Spain, they decided a lot of the Muslims there would have fights, and they'd be like, you know what? Let me call up this guy here. Hey, how's it going? Yes, hi, I'm calling the Catholic monarchs that are from the north. Listen, this other Muslim guy, I don't really like him. Can you actually help me kick him out? And, in return, I'll let you take his kingdom. Yeah, bro, I got you, anytime. All right, see you soon. So what they started doing is that different segments of the community would unite with different small Catholic empires, take over one empire, and then either split that between the Catholics and take some for themselves. It kept going on and on and on and on, where by 1492, there was only one place that was left. It was known as Granada. Anybody here been to Spain? Spain is a beautiful place to visit. It's a sad place to visit, but now to understand the historical significance of Spain and where we are now is a very important discussion. The fall of Granada in 1492 of January is the last Muslim stronghold in the Iberian Peninsula in Spain. And the story goes that there was the last king, who I believe was Muhammad the 11th or the 12th. He basically had a spat with his father, and he allied with Isabella and Ferdinand to push out his father. And the father was a relatively strong individual, and he pushed out his son. But eventually, with the help of Isabella and Ferdinand were who? They were the Catholic monarchs. They are the ones that funded, there's this guy probably none of you have heard of named Christopher Columbus, to go and discover the New World. So in essence, when Granada fell, the entirety of the Iberian Peninsula was now under Catholic control. And this artist surrendering over here, so this here is supposed to be Isabella. They say this here is supposed to be Ferdinand, and one of these two is supposed to be Christopher Columbus. But historical, and actually up here, this is supposed to be Alhambra Palace, which we'll show you in a second. But Christopher Columbus, at this time, they say his history records that he was actually present when Granada fell. So Spain is gone. The Ottomans tried to send ships to help the Muslims, the Spanish Muslims, the Andalusian Muslims, but the Catholic monarchs were able to push back against them and send the Ottomans back. So basically, Granada falls. And for all those years of Muslim rule, first, by the way, they didn't come after the Muslims. Did you guys know who the Catholic monarchs were after first? The Jews. They were actually after the Jews, because much of Jewish history and Jewish philosophy was also centered within Granada, particularly that of famous philosophers. Many of you may have heard of Maimonides. Maimonides was from Granada as well. He ended up fleeing to Morocco. But basically, the Muslims stayed there, but after roughly 100 years, they ended up being kicked out as well. Now, this is modern day Granada. I took this picture of Alhambra Palace with the Andes Mountains in the background. Now, this here is Alhambra Palace. It was the star, the beauty of Spain. Now, so much so, by the time I think the 15 or 1600s came around, the Muslims were also exiled. And many of the Muslims that were exiled, where did they end up? Morocco, right? North Africa. Now, here's another question. Many of the people, the Jews that were exiled from Spain, where did they end up? Morocco is one, but there's two other famous countries. Anybody know? Bosnia, yes, there were Bosnia. Morocco, somebody said. Number one is Turkey. Number two is India. So many of them ended up in those two places. So my father, who's from India, has actually grown up with Sephardic Jews who trace their ancestry to Spain. So it's a very, very interesting point to also talk about. And then also Turkey. Turkey as well. They gave refuge to Jews that were being persecuted in Spain. Now, my point in mentioning Alhambra Palace, and this is actually a picture of some of the architecture there. For those of you that have been there, this is a photo of some of the architecture that is all over Spain. Anyone know what this says? وَلَا غَالِبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ, which means there is no victor except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no victor except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I actually wanted to show a picture to you all. Let me see if this works this way. Let's see. This will work the way that I have it planned. Yeah, oh, awesome. So this is, you see this area here? This is where, in the Alhambra Palace, where Isabella was buried. Isabella was buried here for a very long time, but if you actually look around this room, it says, وَلَا غَالِبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Like if I'm going to put it back here, right? It said, وَلَا غَالِبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. And they say that Isabella, she was like, she gets to Alhambra Palace, she looks around and she says, do not destroy any of this calligraphy, because of the fact that I want the Muslims to be reminded what we took from them for hundreds of years later to come. And she also thought it was beautiful. But what poetic irony that this woman, who quite literally is responsible for the destruction of Muslim and Jewish civilization in Spain, is buried in a room that says there is no victor except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And eventually she was moved out and then she was buried in a different place. But Spain was very, very, very an important event, because you know why? All the loot that they got from the Muslim Empire, from here, funded all of this discovery. So Christopher Columbus arrives where? Where does Christopher Columbus land? Panama? Caribbeans, basically, yeah. But for some odd reason, American kids are like, he landed in Boston. Right? No, he didn't. Right? They say he discovered America, and my man ends up over here somewhere. Right? And where was he trying to go? He's trying to go to India. Right? He's trying to go where I'm from. He takes a U-turn, ends up here, and he's like, all you is Indian now. Right? Literally, why do we call native people Indians? You ever think about that? Because Christopher Columbus made a mistake and the natives have to suffer for that. Right? But basically, he ends up here, and Spanish exploration leads to the discovery of what is considered the New World. And not only that, you'll see how the race did not just stop at the Spanish, but it also led to the French, and it also led to the British, and it also led to the Dutch and the Germans too, but we don't have time to go over that. But coming back to Alhambra, you see the beauty of this place. There's another area that I want to talk about, right? So we just talked about what? We talked about how the fall of Muslim Spain led to the discovery, or funding the discovery projects of European colonizers to spread their seeds all throughout the world. And we also spoke about how this was somewhat retaliatory to the fall of Constantinople and the power of the Ottoman Empire. Right? Keep this in mind, by the way. The Ottoman Empire controlled Mecca and Medina the longest than anyone else ever did in history. Right? Who controlled Mecca and Medina before? Does anybody know? The Mamluks. Very good. So the Mamluks, and then the Ottomans. Who was after the Ottomans? Who? Y'all are saying, who controlled Mecca and Medina after the Ottomans? What? All right, there you go. The British. The British became Khadimain al-Haramain for a few years, and we're going to talk about how that happened. So the fall of Medina is what I want to talk about. Now, many of you may be looking at this picture and thinking to yourself that this guy probably defended the Muslim community and this guy was some bad British guy. So the guy on the left is Sharif Hussein. Sharif Hussein was considered the top authority in Mecca who reported to the Ottoman Empire. And the guy to the right is Fakhruddin Basha, or in Turkish, Fakhri Pasha. Both of these dudes right here were on opposite ends. Sharif Hussein makes a friend And this friend, he goes +44 British country code. This friend shows up. He goes, "Hey, Sharif, how are you doing, bro? I'm coming from England. Can we hang out for a little bit?" "Sure." So he invites his British friend. All right, and the British friend kind of, you sometimes have that cousin that comes to visit you. They have ulterior motive, but they don't want to pay for rent, so they just want to live in your house for a few days, or they don't want to pay for a hotel. So this British friend did exactly that. He was kind of perusing through Arabia, and he says something to Sharif Hussein. He goes, "Sharif, you're Arab. You're Arab. And you're ruled by these Turks?" No, an Arab should rule the Arab. That's what he said. The Arab should rule the Arab. What is this nonsense of a Turkish person ruling you? And Sharif's like, "Yo, cool story, bro. I think that's a great idea." You know what the name of this British friend was? Lawrence of Arabia. Lawrence of Arabia was sent by the British Empire to plant this idea amongst Arabs that were living in the Hijaz and Mecca and Medina, saying that you should rise up against the Ottomans. Because at the same time, the Ottomans were a force to be reckoned with, and they were also being weakened left and right. So in essence, what Sharif Hussein does is he launches a series of campaigns against the Ottoman Empire on behalf of the British. To do what? Allegedly create a rightful caliphate, saying that the Arabs will rule this land once again, and everything will be A-okay after that. Sharif Hussein was promised a little bit of land, and I'll show you what type of land he was promised. Sharif Hussein was told by the British, you'll get Mecca, you'll get Medina, you'll get Damascus and Jerusalem, you'll get all this, okay? He said, you got all of that. So Sharif is like, you know what? Seems like a really good idea. World War I comes about. And in World War I, who did the Ottomans ally with? With the Germans. And when they lost, as it happens in any war, the losing side has to give up land, has to give up money, has to give up a lot of different things. So this time, the British, and Sharif Hussein's like, oh man, I helped these guys out, they're gonna help me out and whatnot. The British said that we're gonna give you Jerusalem and Damascus, all this. Hey, actually, we're gonna renege on our deal. We need you to do something for us. We need you to sign this document known as the Treaty of Versailles. Anybody here heard of the Treaty of Versailles? The Treaty of Versailles said a lot of crazy stuff, but one of the things that was listed in the Treaty of Versailles is that the land of Palestine will start to become not a part of the Muslims in Arabia, but it's going to become a British proctorate, and the British are later going to divide it up in a few different ways. And eventually we know that it becomes the quote-unquote Jewish homeland of people that allegedly left and still had alleged ownership rights 5,000 years ago. And somehow they're like, hey, my grandfather lived here 5,000 years ago. I have a right to this land. That's not how it works. But lo and behold, Treaty of Versailles, Sharif Hussein gets that. And he's told by the British, hey, Sharif, we'll give you the land. We're just going to take a little bit away from what we had promised you, and everything else should be okay. So just sign the document. Sharif Hussein, after showcasing his treachery against the entirety of the Muslim Ummah, says that I'm not going to sign it. I'm not going to sign it. Now, I want you to put a pin there, and I want to turn our attention to this gentleman here. Fakhruddin Pasha was a commander that served in the Ottoman army in Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara. And when World War I had been lost, he is told to leave Medina and to hand Medina over to the British. And he decided that that's not what he is going to do. And instead, what inspires him? What does he decide to do? He goes to sleep one night, and in his dreams, and this is reported by him, he said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to me in my dream, and he said, Ya Fakhruddin, do not give up Medina to these traitors. Do not give up Medina to the British. Rather, fight until even if death takes over you. Until death takes over you. So Fakhruddin Pasha began fighting against Sharif Hussain, even after he's been ordered to give up the city, fighting against the British, and he was doing pretty well actually. He was doing pretty well. But eventually from Istanbul, they get orders saying that, listen, you guys gotta stop this guy. So his own soldiers apprehend him and they send him over to Malta. Malta was famous for what? Sending political prisoners that opposed the British Empire. Malta was home to people from the Khilafat movement that were in India, in Hindustan, people that resisted the British in Egypt, resisted the British anywhere, you ended up in Malta. But the point that I'm showcasing this for, I think there's a picture that's missing, is that the history of colonization quite literally garnered this idea that, oh, the Arab should rule over the non-Arab. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us in the Quran? Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha, wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu. We've created you into nations and tribes. Why? So that you may get to know one another. So that you may get to know one another. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. That the most pious in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are those that have the most taqwa. Not if you're Arab or non-Arab. But now we see here how when you trump racism or you let racism get in the crevices of the community, how that can split up the ummah. All right, we're done with this guy. Let's go back here. Sharif Hussain says that I'm not going to sign this treaty because you guys are giving up Palestine. And Palestine is a non-negotiable of the Muslim ummah. So the British say, okay, we have some friends in the east, we're going to call them. So they call this Najdi tribe, it was in Najd, who were commanded by the British, hey listen, run this guy out, Sharif Hussain. So the Najdis come and they run out Sharif Hussain. And he runs to what is modern day Jordan. The grandson of Sharif Hussain is known as Prince Abdullah, who is the current prince of Jordan. And the current people, you know those people that raided Sharif Hussain? They are the Al Saud family. It's really interesting. And if you read about this history, now the way that history is set up is very different. Right? Some people will say that there was mutinies on both sides and this had to be done. But history is what it is. The reasons you can cite all you want. What happened is what happened. But the point that I want to make is, for that reason of us being all connected, is taking a step back and looking at the Timurid Empire. This Muslim empire, a Turkish empire or a Turkic empire, stretched all the way from Sivas, which is in Turkey, all the way here to modern day New Delhi, Lahore, Iran, Uzbekistan. All of this was one. You know how sometimes, like being South Asian, I sometimes hear this where people are like, oh, my family has descended from so-and-so place, and so-and-so was our ancestor, and so-and-so was our relative, and we take so much pride in it. That's fine and dandy, but it's like, this was all one country. This was all one place. Yes, you had different areas, but Samarkand, all of this was one empire. And I'll tell you what the capital of that empire looked like. This is Samarkand. I had a chance to go there. And these pictures are amazing, amazing testimonies as to how big the Muslim Ummah was. The building on the left is known as Mir Arab Madrasa. Anybody here from Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan? Any of the stans? Anybody? No? Okay. The second picture is a minaret that I'll tell you about. Number one, let me ask you all a question. Which empires did we talk about? About colonization? Right? British, Spanish, French. There's another empire that here affected Central Asia. The Russian Empire. The Russian Empire. So during Russian rule in Uzbekistan, all of the madaris were closed except this one, Mir Arab. And I went there, and it's the only madrasa that's been functioning for, I think, 400 years, even during the time of the Russians. Now, this minaret here in Samarkand has a very interesting story. Before the Russians, The invading force that ended up taking over these people, the Timurids, were the Mongols, right? Genghis Khan, right? Genghis Khan shows up, and they burned everything, Damascus, and they just looted it. They get here, they arrive in Samarkand. Genghis Khan sees this minaret, and he says, burn it down, destroy it. But somebody makes a suggestion to him, like, it's a really nice piece of architecture. It would be good as a lookout. So this is one of the last remaining pieces of architecture that Genghis Khan saw, and he said, okay, fine, don't destroy it, and they left it. And it's a ginormous minaret. I'm actually standing, this is me right here, but I'm actually standing probably like 300 feet, 400 feet from it because of how close it was. The last point I'm going to talk about is this picture. Anybody know where this is? Where do you think this is? Raise your hand. Where do you think this is? India? Ethiopia? Where? Africa? What type of architecture does this look like? So this, the gentleman that said India is correct, but this is not an Indian structure. This is an Ottoman mausoleum in India. This is an Ottoman mausoleum in India. Like, what's the deal with that? The last Muslim stronghold where Muslims held legitimate power was the Ottoman Empire, okay? Whether or not they were effective, not effective, they were an empire that people knew, so much so that when the Declaration of Independence was written by Thomas Jefferson and everyone else involved with that, some of the comments that they had was that America should be so free that even the detested Turk would be allowed here. They actually wrote, they said that America should be so free that the Turk and the Jew would be allowed here. That's how much they didn't like Turks and Jews, right? That's the America we're living in, folks. Right? Keep that in mind when they say, oh, we're so open-minded. This is an Ottoman mausoleum, and we only have a few minutes left. Why is it in India? This mausoleum is built in a place called Aurangabad. Aurangabad was part of the Nizam's empire. The Nizam was an individual entity that was not a part of India, and at one time 100 years ago was the richest empire on the face of this earth. The Nizam himself was an Indian man who recognized that the Muslim Ummah was faltering. He recognized that India and Pakistan were being created. There were riot-tapping in India at that time, in Hindustan. And the Ottoman Empire was also decimating. The last Sultan, Sultan Abdul Majid, he recognized that his power bared very little fruit in Turkey. And he had a secret letter written. And before he had this letter written, he had his daughters married to the sons of the Nizam. You may have heard of this, right? Mu'azzam or Mufakham Jah were their names. And in this letter, Sultan Abdul Majid said, I see my son-in-laws as not great human beings, but I am making the next Khalifa to be designated as my grandson. My grandson. The grandson died 2 years ago, and the letter was released 1 year ago. So the grandson did not know that he himself had been selected to become the next Khalifa. But Sultan Abdul Majid had recognized that now the Khilafah is no more and it cannot be run out of Turkey. So he had made secret plans with the last remaining Muslim empire in India before the actual creation of India in 1947 to actually restart the Ottoman Caliphate in India, because he saw that there was money that could be put behind it. And the Nizam of Hyderabad had agreed to do that. But as you all know, riots got bad. And at the same time, Sultan Abdul Majid in his will had asked to be buried in Aurangabad, India. You know who else is buried in Aurangabad, India? If you know Mughal history, we don't have time to get into it, is the Emperor Aurangzeb, who himself was a known Muslim figure who Islam spread very widely under in the subcontinent. But lo and behold, why am I showing this to you? I'm showing this to you all, brothers and sisters, to showcase that whether you are from India, whether you are from Turkey, whether you are from Mecca or Medina, whether you are from Central Asia, whether you are from any of these places in Iran or in Turkey or in South Asia, whether you're from Spain, whether you are from any of these territories, whether you're Arab, whether you're European, our history is so connected together that we don't realize it. And at the same time, if you are worried about what's happening, for example, if you are worried about what's happening in this place that I will show you a picture of right now, then you have to really ask yourself, what is it that we are doing as an ummah? Okay? And this is the conclusion that I have for you all, because history connects us. This is Masjid al-Aqsa, or rather, this is the Dome of the Rock, right? And the Dome of the Rock is in modern-day Palestine in Jerusalem. And it rests on one of the holiest areas in our deen, in which people are being massacred for. If you think that you want to progress, the Muslim Ummah to progress, and you don't know your history, you're living in a la-la land. Because of the fact that we do not know our history, because people are simply competing for the American dream, because of the fact that people don't have an international outlook on the world, we will not see our brothers and sisters live in a state of peace and freedom. But if you do want to see that, know your history, read your history, learn your history. And I don't want to just give you all heavy air. Make your intention to read something of Islamic history. And I'll just recommend one book to you all. I recommend Lost Islamic History by Firas al-Khatib. It's like 195 pages, and I really think that everyone should read it. They should really get into it and understand how is it that they are going to understand their connection to the Quran, and their history at the end of the day. So that said, I wanted to leave you all off on this. Again, my name is Nihal Khan, and I'm a student at UCLA. And I also run a small little institution, which I'd love to hear from you all to get your thoughts and questions. So I'll just share this. This is just a small little website that I have, that I run a small little institution. We teach courses on various Islamic subjects. And I also do this same presentation all throughout. If you go to maktabacademy.net, there's a small little subscription button in which I publish newsletters about history, about Islamic studies that you all can keep up with. And if you want to get in touch with me on social media, my handle is Nihal201. So I'll basically showcase that to you all. And then inshallah we can stay in touch that way. And I think Imam Umar said that we can also have a Q&A after Salah. Okay, so I'll just write it here. So, or now, okay. So here is, wrong email actually. So yeah, it's a big presentation, so this is a very small amount, just my reflections from my time overseas. So I guess, yeah, so we can do Q&A now, Imam Omar? Did you want to do Q&A now? Okay, yeah, so if anybody has Q&A, comments, questions, you want to throw a tomato at me, like, more than welcome to. Yes. Yes. So the question or the comment that the brother was making is that there are many things in science, math, and in the world in general that history has shown that Muslims discovered first. And do you think that there's been a thwarted effort to kind of erase that and showcase it more so as like a Western phenomenon? Yeah, I think there are many cases of that. Particularly if you look at history, like when Europe was in the Dark Ages, when they were dying of disease because they didn't know how to clean themselves in the bathroom. This is quite literally there. They were being treated in places like Sevilla, like in Cordoba, like in Muslim Spain, where they had Bimaristans, what they'd call them. Bimaristan is literally that, if you know Urdu or Farsi, it's a hospital. And in those hospitals, they were treating people from all over the world. If you read the works of like really amazing Christian philosophers, even one of the popes used to come to Muslim countries to really learn about art and science and whatnot. So Lost Islamic History, that book I mentioned, is a very good foray into that, right? Algebra, al-jabr, right? We know that that word comes from Arabic. All these things people don't understand, don't know, but Al-Haythami and all these different folks, Al-Ghazali, Ibn Sina, Avicenna, they're all names that come from the Muslim world that have become Angloized, and people don't realize that these were people from the Muslim world. Absolutely. I think there's another hand. Yes, brother. Timbuktu is amazing, and the reason I didn't mention Timbuktu is because I haven't been there. But I will say this is another point to everyone keep in mind. Senegambia, Timbuktu, Mali, that whole region is an Islamic powerhouse. So one of my teachers was the grandson of Sheikh Ibrahim Niyas, if you're familiar with him, right? So the one area my presentation lacks in is having not gone to West Africa, and I think West Africa is a major, major, major Muslim civilization and a major, major, major resistance movement against the French through education, through also showcasing like how Islamic spirituality can act. Like when you learn your deen learning it is resistance, and amongst the Tijaniya, amongst the West African tradition, you'll see that. But yeah, that's why I haven't been to Timbuktu yet. Yes. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Right. Mansa Musa, of course. Yes. For those of you who don't know Mansa, anybody here, actually, who's heard of Mansa Musa? Raise your hand. Right? Mansa Musa was once upon a time the richest man on the face of this earth. Right? And he was a good man. He was a Muslim that was practicing as well, and he was not he wasn't someone you wanted to mess with. He wasn't somebody you wanted to cross. And I think that also is really important to understand. The other point of that, West Africa. What's West Africa's connection also with the United States? If you read the works of somebody like Umar bin Sa'id, if you read the works of Bilali Muhammad, whose archives are available in the University of Georgia in Athens, many of these people who came from royalty were taken by the Brits, taken by the Americans, taken by the Spanish, and sold into slavery. And we have their biographies available today. You can actually read about some of them, and this is not even that long ago, right? So there was a woman in her 90s saying that her great-grandmother, right, she's in her 90s today, right? So if she's in her 90s today, she was probably born like the 1930s. So her great-grandmother, go back 80 more years, so early like 1800s or something. She said that she used to see, and this is in like South Carolina, her great-grandparents read in Arabic and pray in Arabic, right? Umar bin Sa'id is known to have written a hand copy of Surah Al-Mulk from memory. And at the same time, you have Bilali Muhammad, or Bilal Muhammadi, I forget. He was actually a scholar of the Maliki madhab and used to write fiqh treatises in Georgia in the 1800s, all in Arabic. Right? This, you want to talk about erasure? This is erasure. Erasure is telling people about European civilization And Muslim kids are having like an identity crisis because they don't know their history. They don't feel proud. They're like, Mom, Dad, when you come to school, can you not speak Arabic or Urdu? Like, no, man. Like, you know like 4 languages. Why is it you don't want to showcase that? It's such a strange phenomenon. It really is. Give your kids a good education does not necessarily mean making them into doctors, lawyers, and engineers. It's making them proud in their historical identity of where they come from. Right? Where you are, where you live, you have a passport. Right? You have a passport, you live in this country, you abide by its laws, that's understandable. But everyone here, most people here, if you ain't Native American, you came from somewhere else. Go learn what the history of that. It's really important to understand. Yeah. Yes. Yes, yes. Yeah. This is Umar bin Sa'id, or he was an alim, right? People don't know about him. He was an alim who was sold into slavery, right? West Africa, folks. West Africa, don't sleep on West Africa. Don't sleep on Uthman Dan Fodio and the Sokoto Caliphate. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Sisters, did you have any questions, comments? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Sisters, any comments, questions? Okay, I had seen a hand in the back. Yes.
So from your experience as a grown-up here and approaching history from different lenses, where do you see we are failing in teaching history in our Islamic schools?
Okay, so the question is, having grown up here, where do we see the failure of teaching history in Islamic schools? I don't know about Islamic schools. I actually went to public school until 8th grade. I think it's important to teach people history not from a political perspective, but allowing young people to explore history through literature. I think this is something in the United States they do well. So like you'll read, you know, Tuck Everlasting, or you'll read The Tale of Two Cities, or you'll read things that are of a European-centric background. I think now there's so much material available which showcases Islamic history in a very, very good manner. There are fiction novels too, right? And I think when people, especially Muslims, think of like fiction, they for some reason have like, you know, a strange karaha, like a revulsion to it. But if you actually study old Islamic Arabic poetry and all that, Kalila wa Dimna, it's all about using literature and fiction to connect people through lugha, for example, through language. So I think there's a lot that's available now. And if in Islamic schools you can get people thinking creatively about history, it'll very much so help. So that's one element. The second element is getting them teaching the importance of history. I think that's there. Like when we talk about Sharia or like Islam, we think it's about like how to make wudu and how to pray salah and believe in Allah or you go to hell. Like that's the thing. But there has to be a creative element associated to it. And I think that requires bringing experts, people that are creative thinkers, and people that know how to engage the social sciences. Like here's the other thing, psychology, history, sociology. All of these are not non-Muslim subjects. Who wrote about those three things? Psychology, the study of the human mind. Sociology, the study of like human behavior, how humans interact. And anthropology, what is the lived experience of humans, for example. Ibn Khaldun, who was a famous historian, wrote about all these issues more than 1,000 years ago. And he is studied today in the Western classroom. But the only difference is that when we're teaching these subjects, we have to examine the assumptions underneath. For example, when you're studying science, the main assumption is that, you know, that atoms and protons and neutrons come together because they choose to. No, You have to now have a study of Aqidah, a study of Islamic critical thinking to help students engage with these modern concepts. And this is not new, right? This is not new. Imam Umar has probably spoken about this, but love it or hate it, the science of like ilmul kalam speaks about this. How do you question the assumptions underneath the knowledge that you're learning? We're not doing that. So that's why a young person may study these subjects and not understand how they connect back, say for example, to the Turath, to the history of Islam. So I think there has to be levels. It's going to be multifaceted, and it's going to be something in our Islamic schools that we hire a consultant and have them like really look at these issues from a baseline level. People that you have experts, you know, Ustad Yaman, right? He taught the Why Islam is True course here, right? You all may have heard of that. That course, what it does, it makes you question the assumptions of your belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, living in the West. You can't just do that with Aqidah, you have to do that with history, you have to do that with all these subjects and get people to understand what those assumptions are, the non-negotiables, and then build on top of that. I think it's a process, but it's definitely doable. Yes? Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. We were wrong versus we have gone wrong. Yeah, that makes sense. Yes.
What could we do to get back to where we were?
Education. Education and understand, and I'll end off on this. You know the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu, you know, you want to learn? Read the seerah. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam literally has the solution for everything that we're looking for, and I'm not exaggerating that. He says that when the day of judgment is happening and you are alive and you see the day of judgment happening, either shamsu kuwirat or either nujumun kadarat, the stars are, their light is going away, the sun is exploding, there's earthquakes, there's volcanoes, and you have a seed in your hand, plant that seed. You do what you need to do and you let Allah do what Allah is going to do. My point in saying that is that the seeds you're going to plant today as a community to like reform your process of teaching the community, you may not see the results of that in your life. Rather, you will probably not see it and know that you made the effort, and inshallah, your children will see it. Your dhurriya, your family members to come will see it, and you need to be okay with that. I think our problem is living in the United States. We have what do you call it, instant gratification. That's our problem. You may not see the results. Stop committing to results, instead commit to a process. So inshallah, that's yeah. Like, yep. It's what I had said over here, right? When we were talking about these two guys. Don't let race divide you. So respect each other and inshallah grow from it. Yeah, sorry, Imam Umar is actually giving me the signal, so we're going to stop here. I'm here for Q&A. Inshallah, we can talk after Salah. Inshallah. Jazakallah khairan.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة. قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
Please straighten your lines, close your hips. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تكونوا كالذين آذوا موسى فبرأه الله مما قالوا وكان عند الله وجيها. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. إنا عرضنا الأمانة على السماوات والأرض والجبال فأبين أن يحملنها وأشفقن منها وحملها الإنسان إنه كان ظلوما جهولا. ليعذب الله المنافقين والمنافقات والمشركين والمشركات ويتوب الله على المؤمنين والمؤمنات وكان الله غفورا رحيما. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بطغواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله